Graham's from Barton Deakin, and Bruce Hawker is in the Sky News Centre from Campaigns and Communications. Thank you very much for joining us. I want to start with Malcolm Turnbull v Andrew Bolt. Grahame Morris, what's going on here?
Well, both men clearly have strong opinions, mainly about each other. Look, you've got two orangutans sort of grunting at each other, but really, if they got serious, well, you think about them, you know, they're only throwing cream puffs. If they really got serious, you'd really know it.
Well, Malcolm Turnbull used the words, what did he say? Unhinged. He used some. He said he was worse than the. You wouldn't see anything as crazy as that on the ABC. And what was the other word? Demented.
Yeah, look, I watched the Andrew Bolt program yesterday, and I thought he was a bit unfair on Malcolm Turnbull. You know, I think Malcolm's behaviour has been exemplary. You know, the idea that somehow or other there's some leadership movement is so secret that even Malcolm didn't know it about it. Look, they clearly don't like each other. They're not on each other's Christmas card list. And a bit of it goes back to things like they differ enormously on climate change. They differ on the views of the ABC. Yeah. But, you know, the idea that somehow or other, you know, Malcolm is doing this to destabilise the Prime Minister is just...
Well, silly. Yeah, the point you make about what Malcolm Turnbull is doing to sell this budget. He actually had, I think, 3 outings in Question Time last week where he was devastatingly good. And Tony Abbott made the point today in his response to this question that he has been shoulder to shoulder at an event over the weekend with...
No, look, there's no doubt Malcolm's one of the best communicators the government's got, and probably one of the best communicators any government's had. But he's been quite disciplined. You know, there's nothing worse than ministers treading on each other's portfolios. And Malcolm's fairly disciplined at sticking to his own ball game, because he could roam anywhere and make a fair fist of it.
The flip side of this is if he did start selling the budget portfolio areas that weren't his, that would be interpreted as, you know, stepping on people's toes.
Well, that's true. And other ministers get really grumpy and they'll start giving him advice and talking about communication. So, yeah. So look, it was unfair.
Nonetheless.
But yeah, it got both men in the media for 24 hours.
Bruce, your thoughts on this? I mean, I made the point earlier that while ever Malcolm Turnbull is Mr Popular in the opinion polls, it's going to be focused on things like a sit-down dinner with Clive Palmer, who is holding this government to ransom over its first budget. It's going to be of interest when that happens.
Well, good try by Grahame, but you know, he's not that naive, and nor am I, nor are you. We know that in Canberra, unlike the rest of the country, you only have to scratch your arm and everyone's talking about it. And in this instance, I'm quite sure that they would have both thought long and hard about what was going on here. And, you know, you sent the text...
Who? Clive Palmer and Malcolm Turnbull?
And Malcolm Turnbull. Yeah, they've both got agendas here. Turnbull has always been in politics for one reason, and that's to be the Prime Minister. Now, I'm not saying that he's about to launch some sort of challenge to Abbott at all, but I think he is in the position and of presenting himself to his caucus as somebody who can actually do these things, who can cut the mustard when it's required. And the fact that he answered 3 questions in Question Time, and as far as I'm aware, none of that actually found its way into television, tells you something. He's pitching to his backbench. He's pitching to the Liberal Party caucus as somebody who can actually sell an unpopular budget. So, you know, I thought when I saw all this that both of these men were engaging in a little bit of skullduggery in their own way. I don't think Turnbull's about to go out and challenge Abbott for the leadership, but let's not kid ourselves. The Prime Minister's in a pretty tough spot at the moment. His popularity is dropping like a stone.
Well, okay, let's talk about that and how this budget sales job is going. Grahame, you haven't actually been glowing in your praise these last couple of weeks of how the sales job is going. We've seen another little trip up from, or a mistake from Christopher Pyne over the weekend as well in a specific aspect of the interest rate rise for student loan repayments. How do you think overall it's going?
Well, look, Christopher Pyne yesterday had quite a technical interview to deal with, and I think he dealt with it quite well, actually. But interestingly, just on this whole education thing, unlike most people, I've actually talked to some of the vice-chancellors, and it seems as if a couple like Melbourne will go up, but a few of the others are waiting to see, and they may well undercut people like Melbourne. And one of the interesting things will be, what does the Australian National University do, where its Chancellor is that great egalitarian Gareth Evans from the Labor Party?
But yeah, well,
you know, what will ANU, what will Gareth do?
But the fees aren't going to go down, are they?
Well, no, but over time there will be competition. And the idea that everyone is going through the roof is just silly. There will be a couple of universities who will try it on, but there will be a lot of others watching them and say, hey, we can pinch some of their students. And I noticed it from netball and football at the weekend. Parents with young kids, you know, teenagers were saying, well, look, you know, our kids are going to go to uni in a few years. If somebody wants to put their fees through the roof, we'll go down the road.
Yep. And look,
can I just comment on that? When Pine did the interview, he quoted the UK. He talked about England and Scotland, and he made 2 points. One, in Scotland, where they're free, where tertiary education's free, that you know, the intake hadn't changed in a way that changed the socio-economic base of those universities. Well, that was because that had already happened years before, and so it was no longer relevant. But more importantly, in England, when they did effectively deregulate the fees and put them right up, in the expectation or hope that there would be competition, initially, a few universities did drop their fees, and they found out very quickly that that was not attracting students, and they put them all up. And that's where they all are now. They're up in the top range for students attending English universities. This is empirically borne out by studies that have been done in the UK. So on that, he was wrong as well. I think he's done a rather poor job of selling the budget.
All right, but just on this issue of errors being made, Grahame, you've seen and sold budgets in the past. There's always going to be a mistake here or there on the detail. Have there been too many with this one, do you think?
Oh, well, look, obviously one is too many, but in fairness, you know, you look at the budget, it is that thick,
yeah.
And plus you get technical, you know, technical questions, and you think, well, what's the equivalent? Well, the equivalent is, say, a journalist, and we got, you know, front page mistakes in newspapers, and these poor ministers are being asked, you know, minute little questions without their technical advisors.
But the issue a minister has to be across their bit of it, right? They don't have to be across the whole, but they have to be at least across their portfolio bit.
Well, their portfolio, but the big picture. You know, every now and again, you know, it's like sitting down at, you know, we have Senate estimates at the moment, but the ministers are sort of surrounded by, you know, by technical, very clever people, and they know the ins and outs.
And in an interview, they don't have that, so you're saying they...
Well, that's right, they're on their own.
Excused a bit of, given a bit of leeway.
But yeah, I do. But, you know, in an ideal world, yes, you wouldn't have mistakes. You're right. And there've been 3 or 4, but they're not clangers.
But the one that Pine got caught out on was a pretty fundamental one. It was whether existing students were going to be caught by the increase in HECS. I mean, that's about as basic as you get. It's not some real minute, detailed point that has to be determined. It's a basic point.
Yes, it was, because it depends on what the hell the bond rate is. You know what it's going to be?
It wasn't about the rate. It was about whether existing students will have to pay a higher interest rate. And he suggested they wouldn't, and in fact they will. Look, the other confusion over the last couple of days has been this story about whether dole recipients should face a drug test, as they do in New Zealand. Kevin Andrews seemed to be signalling they were open to looking at this. The Prime Minister then shut it down yesterday. And it follows the one on last week with the HECS debts being reclaimed from dead people. These sort of things are clouding the message, which the government really can't afford to lose any day of, can they?
Look, I think that's a fair point, but I think there's going to be more, particularly in this social welfare thing. We've got somebody who really understands the welfare system, a bloke named Patrick McClure, and he is doing an inquiry into the whole of the welfare thing. And you can just bet the people who talk to him are going to leak this bit and that bit and whatnot, and say it's all going to be in the McClure report.
But the minister and the PM need to know what their position is on any given day, don't they?
Yeah, that's true. But you know, that was a fairly speculative piece yesterday. You know, the dole thing. And yeah, the Prime Minister came out and said, no, we're not going to do that. But, you know, there'll be a whole bunch of things in this welfare thing that, you know, a lot of Liberals will say, why don't we do that?
But once
Maybe
again,
maybe the PM will say, no, we're not going to.
But once again, this is not the most difficult thing to deal with. A simple phone call to the PM's office. Apparently, Peter Credlin is a control freak. I sort of understand and sympathise with her a bit for pretty obvious reasons now why she'd be like that. But you only have to pick up the phone and say, listen, this is being put to me by journalists from News. What do you think I should be saying about this? Or I'm prepared to say this or that. What do you think? And they still can't get their story straight. Or maybe they don't deliberately get their story straight. Give the Prime Minister a chance to see some minister go out there and fly it and see if it does fly. Yeah. And then and overrule it if he doesn't
on the
like
other hand, on the other hand, as from the media point of view, you want ministers, senior politicians, to be able to speak what they really think about an issue without having to check it off.
And I reckon
from the leaders.
I reckon Kevin Andrews is one of the stars at the moment. You can throw him in anywhere.
Let me finish on a different topic. The Prime Minister does a weekly address, if you like, that goes out on YouTube where he talks about things that he's done or going to do. This week he was talking about his upcoming visit to France, where he'll be commemorating the 70th anniversary of the D-Day landings, and then heading off to Canada and the United States as well. He began by reflecting on D-Day. Take a look.
The D-Day landings changed the course of human history. And as part of the commemoration, I will join 7 Australians who were there 70 years ago. Over 3,000 Australians were involved, including 2,500 Air Force personnel who provided air support for the Allied landings.
Now, in that same video address, the PM went on to talk about his trade focus in Canada and the United States, free trade, and also that Australia's open for business and is intent on repealing the carbon tax. Now, the fact that he worked in the carbon tax political line in a message that was also about D-Day, well, it prompted this from Bill Shorten.
It is not appropriate. It wouldn't matter what political party the Prime Minister belonged to. It is not appropriate, it is inappropriate and disrespectful to contaminate the sacrifice of heroes with the domestic political issues of the day.
Now, look, it may have been a little clumsy, but Bruce, is it really disrespectful to have a weekly message where you do cover off a few things like that?
Well, who would have thought that the battle of, that the invasion of Normandy was really about defending the world from a carbon tax? I mean, the whole thing I thought was a bit tawdry.
He's not saying that. I mean, he's saying I'm doing this and then I'm off to there and I'm doing that.
Yeah, well, I think he could have just spent a bit of time talking about the main purpose of the trip, and that was to commemorate a very important part of the Allied war effort in the Second World War, and rather than to turn it into a politicising exercise about the carbon tax, for heaven's sake, I just think it was wrong. It was wrong. It was bad.
I reckon Bill Shorten is still in trainer nappies, baby nappies. When he gets closer to trainers, he realises that petty little, bitchy little stuff like that is not what a leader does. Not a leader's bootlace yet.
Look, just to finish things off, we've also had confirmation now that we can announce that before he gets to France, the Prime Minister will be stopping in Indonesia at Batam Island, where he will be meeting with President Yudhoyono. That will take place. It's going to be an 8-hour visit there where he will meet with President Yudhoyono and Grahame. This is a breakthrough, given the frostiness in the relationship. He pulled out of a visit there last month, the Prime Minister, when he was invited by President Yudhoyono to attend a summit. Now they are going to meet. We know things have been fairly frosty over the spying allegations, turn back of boats. This is something positive.
Well, I think it is. And I also think the Prime Minister is entitled to thank Yudhoyono. He has, over time, been a very good friend of this country, particularly during the Howard period. And there's been some ups and downs, but, it may well be. We look back and we miss him when he goes.
Grahame Morris, Bruce Hawker, we are going to have to wrap it up there. We'll have full coverage of the Prime Minister's visit as it unfolds over the coming 10 days or so. We'll catch up with both of you next week. Thanks very much for that. After the break, PM Agenda continues. Stay with us.